Welcome back, everybody, and I suck at painting miniatures. The reason I've been gone for so long is that I had 3 different video projects on the desk, and I failed at every one of them. Just couldn't get them to work, and after multiple attempts, I just had to scrap everything and just clear the desk. The only exception being this one, which I had problems with, but I managed to work them out. I think that happens to everyone, where you're just getting frustrated with the paint job and you just give up. Happens to me as well. And wanted to talk about that today rather than specifically what I'm doing to the miniature, because whenever you have a problem painting a miniature, it's great when you can push through, but it's more important to figure out what the problem was. So what we have here is a D&D Cartoon Tribute Miniature Diana. This is a 3D print from STL. And as I said, this is a tribute miniature, meaning a completely legally distinct version, and it looks only barely like the original. And that is where we run into our first problem. How do we make this fairly well detailed miniature that just bears a slight resemblance to the original cartoon look like the cartoon? Well, the answer is we can't. And that's where I made my first mistake with this project. I was too focused on making our Diana here like the cartoon Diana when the figures are almost completely different. And that's my first tip in this video, is getting colors and ideas from different sources to paint your miniatures is a good thing to do. It's a great idea, but don't get too obsessed with those sources and try to make that source look exactly like what you're painting, especially when they are 2 different things. The best example I can think of is, let's say you have a bunch of Space Marines and you want to have them look like Star Wars stormtroopers. You could paint them all white and have a little black here and there. That's not going to make them stormtroopers. They're still going to look like white Space Marines. Now what you can do is just say, I'm inspired by stormtroopers in that situation, and just use that as a starting point and then work out the color scheme for the rest of your miniatures. It's especially important when you get to things like straps and belts and things you want to paint a different color. You know, how do I paint a Terminator captain who looks absolutely nothing like a stormtrooper and he has a lot more detail? Well, you just have to start from that white and then work in the different details based on what you're painting, and not get too caught up on that original source for your idea. So that was the first problem I had with this miniature. I got tunnel vision trying to make it look like a 40-plus-year-old cartoon, and I couldn't paint that way because I didn't have the proper miniature to paint that way. In hindsight, it sounds like, yeah, no, duh, but with other projects going on, get distracted, and sometimes the obvious is not so obvious. The second problem I had with this miniature was getting defeated by blandness. At this point, we have a brownish skin tone, we have brown fur, and a lot of black primer, and the miniature was just looking extremely dull and boring. We have no color on it. Again, if you go to the cartoon, the only bright color she has is a little bit of wrap around her boots, and that's it. At this stage, I was also still dealing with my initial problem, so I was very reluctant to go with a completely different fur color. I did go a little bit more red than in the cartoon, but it still wasn't enough. Now the problem here is something that I often recognize, and it has to do with our primer. As I said previously, we have brown, and a whole lot of black. But the black is eventually going to get covered up. But what our eye and our mind sees right now is just a lot of black, and that affects how we look at the miniature and what colors we are going to apply on it. And this is not something exclusive to black primer. If you use white primer, you may find yourself leaving a lot of areas very light or white because you see them already being white, and so you naturally say, oh, that looks good, I'm going to leave that there. In this case, what I did was stop working on the main body. I usually start at the center and then work out to the extremities, and then work on a different area of the miniature that I know is going to be a certain color. In this case, she normally has a green staff, but because of all the electrical magic lightning effects, I'm going with green on that and just a regular wooden staff. And you can see on camera here, just getting that very light, bright Escorpina green completely changes the look of the model. All of a sudden, it looks much, much brighter, and the paint job looks more intense, and all we did was cover up that black primer. So that is my second tip. If you're ever struggling and can't decide on what colors to use on a miniature, just go around and start putting blotches of color over your primered areas just to test out colors or to remind yourself, hey, this is not going to be black when I'm done. This is going to be blue or green or whatnot. I do this quite often, and I'm not talking about stopping one area and completely painting another. I just take some paint and very haphazardly just splash it on area just as a little color swatch, essentially, to remind me this color is going to be over here, and that may affect the color that I'm painting right now. So after getting over those two obstacles, everything else started clicking into place on this miniature. First of all, the red, like I said, that was normally just on the boots, I decided to put that color throughout the miniature. So increase the amount of red because there's a lot more straps on this miniature. Second, I initially painted the reds off camera, and I went for a much darker red because at the time, all I had on the miniature was, as I said previously, a lot of brown and black. And I painted the red to match that. With this bright green now in place, I realized that I can really ramp up the red, go for a much brighter color, and it won't look so out of place now that it's balanced out with the green. And also that bright red is going to help to break up all of our brown on the body. Also, just to avoid confusion, I'm using Scarlet Blood right now, and then I'm putting Vermilion over it. Scarlet Blood is a little bit more of an orange tone. Decided to go more into a bright red, so basically covering up that previous highlight with this highlight. Just so anyone at home doesn't do exactly what I'm doing here, you can skip the Scarlet Blood stage. I also went back and added a few extra highlights to the fur since, again, I was no longer trying to copy a cartoon, very limited detailed cartoon. I decided, no, I'm going to paint this how I know it should be based on my own knowledge and my own skill. So don't copy a very simple cartoon, paint what you know will work. So if you made it through all this rambling, thank you, by the way. I'm going to show you something a little bit new that I've been working on. And as I said, experimenting is always good. Doesn't always work out, but it's practice and trying until you find what works out. In this case, I'm still playing around with the TMN technique and trying it with different colors. And one of the things I've been trying to do is come up with my own gold recipe. The only non-Vallejo Model Air metallic I'm using is Game Colored Glorious Gold, and it's very thick and gelatinous because all it has in there is mica. So trying to mix up my own gold using, in this case, steel, brown, and yellow ink. Starting off with the shade first for our gold, which is Vallejo Model Air Rust, and Beastie Brown. And then what we're going to do to highlight this is to add that previous steel mixture. The problem with the game color gold is it has mica in it, like a majority of your metallic paints, and it's kind of thick and gloppy, and it's just very hard to work with. The Vallejo Model Airs use aluminum powder, which is much more smooth and has a bit more shine to it. However, their gold kind of sucks, so been trying to mix up my own, not only with gold, but I also have been experimenting with different color metallics using the TMNT technique. That's one of the failed projects because I still haven't quite dialed it in, but I'm going to continue working on it. But yeah, another quick tip there, if you ever need color metallics, try mixing in inks with your steel or silver metallic paint. And then last but not least, going with a glaze, going back to our skin, using a very thinned mixture of charred brown and gory red. A glaze is not going to do much over dark colors, but I just wanted a little bit more red into the skin tone, especially since we added all the red details. So to add to the charred brown we used at the beginning, a little bit more red here, and also the glaze will help us to smooth out the skin. And here is our finished Diana tribute model. It's not a great paint job, but when you're struggling and painting things over and over and over again, actually I repainted this miniature 3 times and still ran into problems. Just getting it done is a really good feeling, so I'm happy it's done. I'm not going to paint it again to try to make it look better, sorry. But I hope this helps you to realize that, even I have problems, very simple sounding problems when it comes to painting miniatures. And again, getting around or through those problems is important and good, but realizing why they were problems is even more important. So don't get caught up too much when you're using something as inspiration that's not matching what you're painting, and also don't get confused by the color of the primer you're using. But that is it for this one. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time, hopefully much sooner. Bye-bye.
Oh, sweet information superhighway! What gem bring you me from the far reaches of cyberspace?